What's up, everybody? This is just Last here, bringing the brand new video. Today we're going to be discussing the future of the game and how I think that Konami might actually push things in the near future. So, what am I going to be talking about? Well, I'm going to be talking about how the legacy support in Invasion of Chaos is going to basically spell the, I guess, doom for the current top meta decks, and I want to discuss that with you. Now, again, I want to stress this out. I want to stress this throughout the entire video that this is merely speculative, and you can take this as with a grain of salt. But I think that what I have and what I think and what I believe is happening is very, very valid, and I think it's a very valid opinion. So I'm going to go into detail about that. So first things first, I want to talk about how Konami has realized that the format isn't as broad as it used to be, and it's not. When the Shaddoll Necroz format came around, you had at least other decks that were still topping the formats. You still had Satella Knights, you still had Yang Zings to an extent, you still had Cleaforts topping, you still had Shaddolls, you still had Necroz, you still had Volcanics topping, and you still kind of had Infernoids to an extent topping as well. So I would consider that a very diverse format, and that's something that Konami is trying to implement more and more, or at least wanting to, more and more into their formats. So by that means they have to kill other archetypes that are generally way too powerful for the game or way too old for the game. And I'm going to stress this out, that Cosmos is not healthy for the game. It's not healthy. It's very unhealthy. And Burning Abyss has been around for way too long. Burning Abyss has been around for almost 2 years, which is absolutely insane. If you were to tell me that Burning Abyss or deck was gonna have a very powerful mainstay for 2 years, that would be unheard of back then, because decks usually only had about 6, maybe 8 months to live, and then they were killed. That's usually how it worked. Shaddolls had a bit. I guess Cleaforts and Satella Knights had a bit more staying power. I guess some people argue, well, that Satella Knights might actually have had more staying power than Burning Abyss has. But Satella Knights aren't doing anything in the current meta right now. They're just a high tier 1.5 deck. That's all there are. Cosmos in particular is not very good for the game, because if you told me that entire archetype, if you told me that part of an archetype can be targeted by my opponent's card effects, that would be absolutely crazy for me too. I would actually call for those cards to be banned. Not on top of that, those cards would have additional effects. So I also believe that diversity as a whole is kind of good for the game. I'm gonna whereas having only like maybe 3 decks isn't as diverse as Konami wants it to be. So I'm gonna stress this out, that Monarchs, in my opinion, has been one of the best decks. It's one of the best things that Konami could have ever done. It's the smartest decision they've ever made, because it gives casual players a means to be competitive in a casual sense, because they don't have to spend very much money on this deck. They don't have to spend that much money for even the extra deck version of this deck, extra deck Monarchs. I would argue that deck is relatively cheap, but I mean, when you compare it to the rest of the decks here, I mean, it's kind of the second best deck, I would say. But obviously they're trying to obviously defining lines of the format should be made, like having a definitive best deck. But I want to apply Hearthstone's logic to this. In Hearthstone, the best deck is considered Zoo, because it's the most popular deck. Everyone seems to be playing it, but it's not the definitive best deck. There are other decks that currently top there. There's Cthulhu Druid, there's Cthulhu Druid, and there's N'Zoth Pirate Warrior. There's mid-range aggressive warrior. There's Cthulhu. I guess Cthulhu Mage is kind of a deck, I guess. But anyway, I digress. There's just not a definitive best deck. And I think that's what Konami has always tried to avoid, is a definitive best deck. When Dragon Rules came out, I think that's when they realized that they didn't want a definitive best deck. They wanted a best deck, but they didn't want it to be, overarching the entire format. So, and the next thing I think Konami actually realized is the implementation of certain archetypes. So, for example, when Ignites came out, when Air Mages came out, when Grails came out, and to a certain extent when Psy-Frames came out, that was kind of poor timing. So, Air Mages and Ignites had a very brief window to actually do anything, and I would argue Psy-Frames had that very same brief window. But for the most part, I believe that people when these archetypes came out, they were kind of overlooked. Ignites and Psy-Frames weren't that overlooked. They still had competitive sense, and they still had the means to be competitive in a brief time, because no one knew how to play these decks, and no one knew the counters to these decks, and now people do. The decks aren't that big of a problem anymore. When you're talking about like a deck with air mages or Gradles, these decks didn't have any competitive staying power. They were fine, fun decks, and they were really good. I guess to a certain degree, but all in all, they weren't very competitively viable. And I think that's what Konami is trying to fix. They're trying to fix the competitive sense in the Yu-Gi-Oh community. They're trying to fix the way that people see archetypes in the community, rather than being completely hindering the rest of the set. By when they could just release better cards in the set, they could just release better archetype cards, which is what they're trying to do. Because I think that all these cards, Ignite, Unite, Threader, Junior, and Angelica, and the Synchro that just recently got released or announced, is a step in the right direction for a lot of these decks. It's a really good step in the direction. So, yeah. So I feel like that's what they're trying to do with that, because they don't want these decks to fade in abject obscurity and be forgotten. Not yet. They want decks to be forgotten, but they don't want them to be forgotten in the current era that we're staying in, that we're in. And I think that this era is the way to do that. And the third and final point that I want to draw attention to is they realize that the reason why current archetypes are too powerful, or what happens when the current archetypes are either too powerful or too old, kind of bogs down the deck or game state, and it kind of makes the game stale. And to an extent, like I said, I kind of don't want to see Cosmos to die. I don't want to see Burning Abyss to an extent, even though I don't like that deck, to die. I don't want Monarchs to die. But when people were considering the last ban list, they should have done more to each deck. They should have done more to each deck. Cosmos got a slap on the wrist by semi-limiting Emergency Teleport, and I guess to a certain extent, Monarchs got a slap on the wrist because the FTK is dead, I guess, to an extent, and they got rid of Offstar, which Monarchs were playing. So yeah. I believe that since they are changing this, we might actually see a flip of table here when it comes to archetype performance and all that stuff. We might actually see a Cosmos and Burning Abyss simply die. I don't think Monarchs will be that big of an issue if archetypes are balanced correctly to compete with it. Monarchs should be and always should be one of those decks that you can find these structure decks for $10 a piece, build a competitive deck, and run with it. You don't have to open booster packs, order cards that are like $25 to make sure that you have everything. Monarch should be one of those decks that you can buy with a budget that is actually really good, and it kind of should be the best deck in some cases because it kind of deserves to be, because it promotes that casual competitive mindset, and that's a good thing. So anyway, tell me what you guys. Oh, also, I wanted to draw out the reason why I think that we need an overhaul on the ban list as well. This is my final point, actually. When the last ban list came out, they stuck to their guns with the adjusted ban list by hurting the Performage deck, which arguably was a very smart decision. The deck was tier 0. The deck was bogging down the rest of the format, and it was not very good. But they also decided to hit other decks. They decided to not really pay that much of attention to them, though. They didn't hit them directly. They just kind of patted them on the wrist and said, "Don't do that again." But they're doing it again, inevitably. But anyway, I feel like that they could have approached this ban list a bit differently. And going forward, I feel like that they need to approach these decks a bit more harshly. I think that Monarchs might need to be hit in some degree, but I don't think that should That should kill the deck. I don't think we should kill Monarchs. They can kill Cosmos and Burning Abyss simply because they are inherently unhealthy for the game. So, anyway, tell me what you guys think about this whole discussion down below, and I will see you guys in the next video. This has been Chess Lance, and I am signing out. See ya.